Before we learn how to create and modify our reports, I think it's a good idea to introduce you to reports to see the different views that are available. And so here's my report, the overall report, and it's going to be based upon a table either directly or indirectly through a query. And it's actually based upon the inventory query, which is based upon, well, what table or tables? To find out, let's right-click on it, go to the design view, and it's these four tables right here: the manufacturers, computers, employees, and departments. So let's close out and take a look at the report. Double-click, and by default, when you open up a report, it opens up in the report view, as opposed to three other views that I'll go over in just a minute. So what you're looking at here is the title of my report, Department Inventory, and today's date. And then down below, I have a list of all the employees, the computers that are assigned to each employee, and they're grouped by department. So in this department, Department Code 100, Human Resources, I have a total of 1, 2, 3 employees, and their corresponding computers that they're assigned to, the barcode, asset tag, manufacturer, date received, purchase price, and amortized. And we can go down to the next one, Department 200, a couple employees, and go all the way down till I see the entire report. And there we go. And so that's the report view. Now, if I want to print this report off, and I'm curious to find out how many pages there are in printable form, well, the best thing to do is to go to the print preview, which is the second view that I want to cover right now. And to do that, you can just go ahead and find a blank area and right-click. So you can switch views, because if you right-click on one of these fields, well, let me try a field here. There you go. You can actually see other options there, like when it comes to filtering, but we won't do that. Let's go ahead and find a blank area and right-click, and let's go to the print preview. Now what you see here is what's going to come out of your printer. So let's go ahead and take a look at it, and we've got the scroll bar here, but notice that when I hover over the page, I get this little magnifying glass. That when I click on it, it zooms out so I can get the overall layout view of it. And you can see I've got a lot of white space over here. And so I may want to tweak my margins and so on. And we'll learn how to do that in a later training video. But when I click on it, it zooms in. Click on it, it zooms out. Click on it, zoom in. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the bottom. And there we go. We're on page 1 of 3. So to go to the next page, I can go ahead and click on the page navigation bar. Next page, we're at the end. You can also come in here and just delete the page number and type in 1 and hit enter, and it takes you right to page 1. And so like the other record navigation bars, you can go, well, in this case, page by page, or to the last page, or to the first page, or just like I did, type it in here. And one thing that I want to cover, let's go ahead and go to the second page. And at the bottom of the second page, take a look at George Bond. Now, he's got a computer that's assigned to him, but I can't see it at the bottom of page 2. If I want to get the asset tag for George Bond, I have to go to the next page and scroll to the top, and there's the, well, it looks like the asset tag 2009. It's not really a barcode, but in any case, I make up numbers here for my examples. And then the name of the, what is that? Is it the name of the manufacturer? You see, the problem that I'm running into is that when I'm looking at it right now, where I print it off, that's how it's going to come out. So when I'm later looking at this, I'm like, I got to go back down to the bottom of page 2 to find out the label for that column is, oh, that's the manufacturer. In a later training video, I'll show you how you can clean this up so you can keep these together so they don't break across the page. So you're doing what we're doing now, where we're like, okay, let me go back to the bottom of this page, then to the top of the next, back to the bottom of this. Oh, that's annoying. And then while we're in the print preview, up at the top you got its related contextual print preview tab, so you can go ahead and just print it. Set your margins, go ahead and choose the page layout, the page setup. Also, if you want to see it 2 pages or more pages, and we'll cover a lot of this in a later training video. And then to close out of here, well, you can go ahead and right click and switch your views, or just click on close print preview, and it goes back to the default report view. And when I right click on the tab, there you go, report view, print preview, what you see is what's going to come out of your printer. And then you got the other two, the layout view, which we talked about in earlier training videos. Well, for our forms at least, when you select it, it allows us to go ahead and choose a field or hover over a field. And you can see when I get on the border of this field, how I get arrows pointing up and down. I can click and drag to resize that, or if I click on another field, and it selects that, and I've got the 4-way arrow, I can actually click and drag that and move it over there, but then the label's not there, so I'd have to click and drag that field and move it over there and switch the labels around. And the layout view can be handy, but in this case, it's not for me. My favorite view is the design view because I got more flexibility and it's easier, especially with something that's a bit more tricky like this. So let me go ahead and hit undo a couple or several times. And then speaking of the design view, let's right click and go to the design. And the design view looks just like the design view for our forms in that you get a grid, rows and columns of dots and lines to help you line it up. But here in the design view, take a look at the bars here. First off, you got the report header. What comes down below that bar is going to be in the report header, or up at the top, the first page that's heading the report, hence report header. Then down below, you can have something at the top of each page, or the page heading, page header, and I don't have anything at the top of each page, so there's nothing there. I could create a little text box that has the name of the report that they're looking at the top of every page. And then down below that, you have the department code header. So I've got all the labels, so it's grouping my report by departments. And then underneath that, I actually have them grouped by employees, because maybe I have some employees that might have more than one computer. Because if I have an employee that has more than one computer, I want to be able to keep that all grouped under the employee. And then below that, I have the details. So we've got the labels and then the data that gets pulled in. So this will pull in the barcode for each employee, and it's got the label up above, so I know what I'm looking at down below in the report view or the print preview. And then the manufacturer label with its corresponding text box or data field, and the rest here. And then at the bottom of each page, in the footing of each page, the page footer, you got a code here that will pull in the page, well, if you have 5 pages, it'll be page 1 of 5, page 2 of 5. So that way when I print it off, it lets me know that if somebody hands me 3 pages and it says I got page 3 of 5, then I'm like, okay, where's page 4 of 5, page 5 of 5? It's a good indicator that I'm missing something. And then you have the report footer. There's nothing there, but that just means it comes at the end of the report at the bottom, the last page. So if I have 5 pages, at the very bottom of that 5th page, in the footing of that page at the end, whatever you want to add there. And we'll go over that more in detail in later training videos, but here's an introduction of the 4 different views when it comes to looking and working with your reports. Oh, and as a selling point for my Excel training videos, you see up here, this little coding, it's called the Now function. If you learned functions in my Excel training videos, you can actually put those and use those in the report. And what the Now function does is it pulls in today's date, meaning now. So a lot of the things that you learn in my Excel training videos can be very helpful when it comes to learning Access. To create an instant report, just add water. No, I'm kidding. I want to see if you're paying attention. To create a report in a single click, go ahead and select a table or a query that you want your report based upon. I'll leave it selected the computers table here, and then just come up here and click on the Create tab, and go to the Reports group, and click on this button right here, Report. Click, boom, Instant Report. Now the default name of the report is the table that this report's based upon, and to change it, we got to save it first. It hasn't been saved yet. So when I come up here, click on Save, it forces a Save As. That's good because it gives me a chance to rename this and not have the 3-letter prefix TBL for table, because it's not a table, it's an RPT report. And it's on computers, so I'll leave it like that. Click Okie dokie, updates the tab, adds it over in the navigation pane so you can see it's been saved. Now below that, we've got the title of the report, TBL Computers, and that's not doing it for me. So to change it, okay. First of all, can I change it in this view? Okay, before that, what view am I in? Okay, before that, how many views do the reports have, and what views can I make changes as opposed to just viewing the data they're in? Well, to find out, let's just come up here and right-click on the tab, and there you go, a total of 4 different views. Now, the current view that I'm in is the layout view. As you can see that icon has been highlighted. That's also the same view that's available in our forms. And as you recall in our forms, that when you're in the layout view, it's the same thing here, that when you select a field or a label and you see it highlighted in orange, that means that that's the layout view. It's the only view that highlights it in orange. Let's go ahead and right-click again And the layout view allows you to resize, rearrange the labels, the fields, also rename the labels, as opposed to the design view, which, well, it does all that, but a whole lot more, because that's you actually designing the report. The layout view is just a quick fix to move a few things around, rename them. And then you got the report view, just viewing the report. And then finally, if you want to print the report, you can go to the print preview, get a preview of it before you hit the big fat print button, because you know what? There's been many times I printed things off that if I just previewed it, I would have saved some pages. So you want to make sure you go to the print preview. Besides, that's the only place you can go to print the reports. You got to preview it first. So let's leave it in the layout view to go over it just briefly, as we'll cover this in a later training video in more detail. But in the layout view, like I said, you can go ahead and resize, rename, move around. So if I want to rename computers, the TBL here, just double click till I can get inside the label field. And let's just get rid of the TBL and hit enter. That looks good. And then down below, we can select the data fields. And I'm like, oh, that field is just huge. Just got single digits here. So to resize it, I can just go ahead and hover over that selected orange field until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. So the left-hand side of the cell, click and drag, and I can crunch it. Now, it shrinks the field here, which is nice, but it cuts off the label. Can't see the manu and the manufacturer ID, and also it extends the asset tag field over, and that's just not doing it for me. Let's go ahead and hit undo. I mean, I could come up here and double click really fast to get inside the label and maybe delete most of this and keep it like down to man ID, which is an option. Or better yet, as you recall, when you select a cell here, if you look up in the left-hand corner and you see a tag, that means that all these cells are bound in a layout view. And there's two different layout views. There's stacked and tabular. And so if I click on that, it selects all the cells that are bound into that table. In fact, if you watch my word training video on tables, it's the same thing. When you go ahead and click inside the table or hover over it, and you see a tag, you click on it to select the entire table, and that includes all the cells in that table. So it kind of limits me as far as the flexibility when I'm working with those kinds of layouts here. So the other option is to go ahead and right click on the tab, go to the design view to break this up. And what you're looking at in the design view is the grid. You got the report header section. And so what that does is that if we had like 20 pages in the report, this is going to be heading the report, the title of it, on the first page up at the top on page 1 of 20 pages, 30 pages, 2 pages. The report header. Then you have the page header, or at the top of each page, heading each page, are all the labels, and then the data down below so we know what we're looking at. The label asset tag for the data that's going to be pulled in the asset tag data field. Now, when I go ahead and click on any one of these, I don't know if you can see it, but you get this like dashed line that goes all the way around here into that little tag there for the table, the layout. Click on it and it selects all the cells there. So if I want to go ahead and break it up so I can get more flexibility when it comes to moving my labels around, resizing them, not only in the design view, but also in the layout view, just come up here, click on the Arrange tab, go to the table group, and there you go, tabular and stacked. So if we remove the layout and click off, okay. So when I select a label or its corresponding data box or text box that contains the data, then it just selects it separately and it doesn't pull up this little tag that allows me to select all the cells that are bound within that table. They're now broken out of it. So then I can go ahead and hover over the right middle resizing handle of that label until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Click and drag, move in, move out, resize the label. And if I come down here and resize that, just about like that, you see how it doesn't pull that over? Well, let me show you. Let's go to the report view, right click on the tab, go to the report view. There you go. So that doesn't close up the gap. It just stays there. And that's really nice. I like that. And so you can right click, go to the layout view and hover over that and stretch it open. And that's nice. And we can do this and collapse that. And it doesn't pull that over because it's not bound in that layout. We remove the layout. Cool. And so we get more flexibility here. And then finally, I want to keep it simple here because we'll go over this a lot more in detail in more advanced training videos for the layout view and the design view. So let's go ahead and change views and right click and go to, well, let's go back to the report view. As you can see in here, well, you can select a cell and type whatever you want, but it says down below in the information bar, the status bar, the control cannot be edited. Whoops, the reports are read-only, so you can only read it in the report view. And then finally, the print preview. What you see here, when you come up here and click on the print button, is what's going to be coming out of the printer. So if I click on the page, it's the zoom feature. It zooms out so I can see the layout of page 1. And in fact, I only have one page here. It doesn't even go all the way down to the bottom of the first page. So click on it to zoom in, analyze the data, and oh, what's that? It's being cut off. Let's go ahead and right click on that, go to the layout view, and scroll down to the bottom. And in the layout view, it's beautiful because it's quick. I can see the data in the cell that is cut off. Hover over the bottom border, click and drag to stretch it out, and then right click in a blank area, go to print preview. Ah, that's nice. As opposed to right clicking and going to the design view, when I come down here and get the total, I can't tell if it's showing me everything because I can't see the data, just the function within it. And by the way, you can learn a lot about functions in my Excel training videos. I got a lot of functions there that you can also pull over in here to help with your reports, like the sum function, and then the rest of the syntax there. And I'll show you how you can expand that later on. In any case, let's go right click, back to print preview. If everything looks good, then go ahead and print it, but you can also set the page layout, the page size, zoom in to look at 2 pages at once or more pages. And then, of course, instead of just printing it, you can actually export this into Excel, a text file, PDF. That way you can email it off electronically or email it to somebody. And then when you're done, of course, you can close print preview. And we're back to the design view. Or you can right click and go to the report view. Another way to create a report is using the report wizard. The wizard is going to ask us a bunch of questions, and based upon our answers, it's going to create a fancy report. So to do that, come up here and click on the Create tab, go to the Reports group, and there's the wizard. Click on it. It's a step-by-step process. It's going to be asking us questions, and it says, which fields do you want on your report? So you can have all these, well, different tables and queries. As you can see down below, it includes tables and queries. All those that are listed over here will be found when you click on the drop-down arrow here. So we can go ahead and choose, like, let's do departments, and double-click to add the department name that we want to add to our report. And we'll leave that there and add, click on the drop-down arrow, additional fields from the computers table. And so with it still there, from the departments table, the department's name, we can add asset tag, manufacturer ID, double-click at date received, and double-click purchase price. Now what I want to be able to do is to add all the computers that have been assigned to an employee and get the running total for that entire department to see which department we're spending the most computers on. So I've got my department name, and then later on in the wizard, I can choose to group it for all the computers that are in the IT department. It'll group them there for the HR department, group them there, and so on. But keep in mind that when you're choosing different tables, just make sure that they're related either directly or indirectly. And so are my computers related to the department table? Well, to find out, let me click Cancel, come up here, click on the Database Tools tab, go to the Relationships group, and let's check out our relationships to find out if they're related either directly, the computers table, to the department table, or indirectly. Click on Relationships. There's the computers table. Where's my departments? Right there. So they're related, but through the employees. Doesn't matter, as long as they're related directly or indirectly, I'll be able to have them match up, even though I won't include any of the employees. Just the computers, well, barcode, manufacturer ID, date received, purchase price, and which departments that those computers have been assigned to. But they're assigned by employee, but since each employee belongs to a department, there's the codependent table that links these two up that allows me to go ahead and have them grouped, as we'll do in the wizard, by department, these computers. So let's close out, go back to our Create tab, go to the Reports group, do the wizard thing, and let's go through this. Now, I don't want to add computers first because I want to add the department name first. Double-click up at the top for my selected field, the first field, and then I'll go ahead and go to the computers and double-click on my 4 fields here, and then click Next. So how do you want to view your data? What does that mean? Well, when it has departments selected, it wants to group everything by department. So in the hierarchical structure, it's outdented and up at the top, and then everything falls underneath it. So for these computers that are in the IT department, that'll be grouped together. Then when it goes to the next department, any computers in the HR, it'll group those together and so on. As opposed to viewing our data by the computers and not by departments, it puts them all together. There's no grouping. So the department name is right next to the asset tag to the manufacturer, and that's not doing it for me. So let's go ahead and go back to departments and then click next. Now when I click next, if it didn't group or I want to add additional grouping levels, you can do it right here. So to add another grouping level, just go ahead and select a field that you want to add, and you can double click on it and it adds it over to the right, or double click on it to remove it. Or with it selected, you can of course use the arrow to move it over or the arrow to move it back. Let's go ahead and move it over because I'm getting dizzy. And see if this makes sense. So we have a group by department, like in the IT department. It's going to have a bunch of computers. I think there's like 3 in there, 4 or 5. Well, actually, the IT department has maybe a lot more, 6 or 7. Then after it pulls all the computers in that department together, those computers, if they're from the same manufacturer, well, then it doesn't really need to group them. But if they're from 2 or more different manufacturers, like 2 of them are from Global, 2 of them are from Spytek, then it groups the Spyteks together, and it groups the Globals together, or their IDs together. So we can have the manufacturer IDs grouped after it does it first by department. I'm not going to do that. I'll double click and let it go and just keep it simple here. And then click next. And then it says you can sort your records after it groups them, the records within that group, either ascending or click on it to go descending. I'm going to go ascending and pick the field that I want them to be sorted by. How about the barcode, the asset tag? Select that. That works for me. And then remember, I want to be able to get a total summary or grand total for the purchase price of the computers for, well, all the departments, but also for each department. So let's go ahead and click on Summary Options. And there we go. It only shows one field because that's the only field that is a number field that allows me to go ahead and sum up or average or find the lowest number or the maximum number within that purchase price field. But I want to get the sum total. And then over to the right, the default is to show the detail and the summary. What that means is that it'll show, in this case, all the computers, the details, and not just the sum total. But if I chose the summary only, I just get the summary of the departments and it will not show the computers that are assigned to that department. So I want to see the computers as well as a summary for the department of those computers and click Okie dokie. That's good. Let's go ahead and click Next. And then how do you want to see the layout of your report? Do you want it stepped? So the dark orange fields are your labels, and then the data is the light orange fields down below. And so you can see it stepped in a hierarchical structure. So there's the department, and then if I had it grouped by manufacturer ID, it would be stepped down, and then over to the right, and then any other groupings in that structure, or you can do it by block. So it goes from left to right, or you can do it by outline, kind of stepped, as it goes down and over, and there's the labels, but I'll keep it stepped, and click Next. And then what title do you want for your report? Well, it's not going to be a table, TBL, so let me go ahead and just delete that and call it RPT because it's a report, and it's going to be Purchase Department in any case. Let's go ahead and click Finish. Well, you can preview the report or just go right to the design view if you want to make any additional changes before you preview it. Let's go ahead and preview it, click Finish, and there it is, the long name, so it's been saved. And there's the title of the report, and let's see if it checks out. We've got our department, Human Resources, and it grouped the computers, well, those that are assigned to the employees who are in the Human Resource Department right here, a total of 3, and it's sorted by asset tags, so let's see if that checks out. Ascendingly, that is. So from the smallest number up to the largest, oh, that's nice. And we have to scroll over if we want to see any more of the report. And then we scroll down, and you get the totals for each department. So it looks like, well, sales, that one's kind of high in number there. And ooh, IT is a close second there at 12,000. And so below that, we've got customer service. Let's go to the next page. Oh, let's scroll to the top. And then we got 2 more. And then we have the 2 for customer service at 5,000. And there's the grand total. So I can click on it to zoom out, go back to page 1 to get an overall layout view. Looks pretty good. And then of course, if I want to make any changes or tweaks, move the fields around, resize them, as you recall in earlier training videos, just, well, right click, go to the layout view, and you got your highlighted fields. Go ahead and select the ones that you want to manipulate by hovering over the borders and clicking and dragging to resize them, or clicking on the field itself and moving them around, or double clicking to go ahead and rename the labels for the columns here of those fields. And let me go ahead and click off. You can also right click, go to the design view, clean this up so you've got a report header, which is the heading of the report, first page out of the 2 pages. If you had 20 pages, it would just be at the top of the first page out of the 20 pages. So heading the report, report header up at the top. Then you have the page header up at the top of each page. And then you've got your department code header. So below the labels, you got your data fields, the details, and then the department code footer. So at the end of each department, you get the summary of it. And then at the bottom of each page, or the footing of each page, you get, well, the now function. You can learn more about that in my Excel training video on functions. It just means it's pulling in today's date, what's now, and then you've got the report footer. So at the very end of the report, the grand total, if you can see that. That light shaded gray text, grand total. Well, let me double click. Oh, there you go. When I click inside of that, it pops out against the white background and click off. And you just saw that when I double click on a field, it brings up its corresponding property sheet, more details about the field of what you can do to the field, like changing the formatting of it, doing some coding, but we'll cover that in a later training video. So let's go ahead and right click. We can go to the report view so we can just get an overall view of it and allow us to scroll from top to bottom and not have to go from one page to the next unless we want to right click and go to the print preview. If we have any additional pages, then we can go ahead and click go to the next page, or let me click on to zoom out, click on to zoom in, and then if it's a wrap, go ahead and click on print. Of course, you got your other options here that we'll talk about in a later training video to work on those reports that are a bit difficult and not showing all the data on a page, or breaking and causing a widow or an orphan at the top or bottom of pages where you have to flip back and forth. So access is a process. Bear with me. We'll be covering all this in more advanced training videos. When I'm done, let's go ahead and close the print preview and close out of the report. And any changes we made, nah, I won't save it. If there's ever a time you want to be able to perform simple calculations between 2 or more fields in your report, or even with another value, or a combination of both, here I want to show you how you can create that custom calculated field. And in this example, I'm looking at my purchasing info report where I have a list of all the computers grouped by department and their purchase price over to the right-hand side. So let's say that I want to get all new computers, and let's do this. Let's go ahead and create a custom calculated field over to the right. That could be like our proposed purchase price for the new computers, where it's going to be based upon the original price and maybe with an increase by 5%. So how about if we do that? We create a custom calculated field that multiplies the original price by 5%. Sound good? Alrighty. To do that, let's come up here and right click on the tab, go to the design view, and let's do a quick overview of the design view, what we got here before we create that custom calculated field. So up at the top in the report header section, we got the title of the report. So it's heading the report. It always appears on the first page up at the top of the report, nowhere else. Report heading, heading the report, report header. And then down below, the page header, which has all the labels that will appear at the top of each page in the report, or heading each page, page header. Which brings up a good point. In the design view, how can you tell the difference between labels and data fields or text box fields? Just by looking at them, because the labels will be transparent and the text boxes will be filled in with white. So we've got all the labels here, which you hardly can read, but I can kind of make it out. And so that's heading up at the top of each page in the report. And then below that, we've got it grouped, all the records were the details, and there's the details, the records, before it actually lists the records. It's going to find out which records belong to which group and group it by, well, by the department name. So after it groups them by department name, then at the end of each group, you got a code here, but also you get the sum total of the purchase price of all those computers that are in that department. And then at the bottom of each page, or the page footer, you have the now function, which means it's going to pull in today's date. In fact, you can learn more about the now function and a whole plethora of functions in my Excel training videos, so you may find that helpful when it comes to creating your custom calculated fields to know how to write formulas and work with functions. And then over to the right, you've got, let's see, page like 1 of 2, or however many pages you have in your report. And then below that, at the end of the report, or at the report footer, you get the grand total of all the purchase prices of our computers. Now, to go ahead and create that custom calculated field, we have to add a blank text box or data field where we can write the formula within that blank or unbound text box. It's called unbound because it's not bound to anything like these other text box fields. They're bound and pulling in this data. Well, let me show you. To add that text box field, come up here on the Design tab, go to the Controls group, and my screen resolution's not that high, so I have to click on the Controls drop-down arrow to see the controls, and that's what I'm looking at right there, the text box field or the data field, but it's called the text box field, so we'll start calling it that. So click on it, and when you move down into the grid, you can see that it has that icon next to the plus sign, plus meaning that when you click, it's going to instantly insert the text box or the data field, not only the data field, but also a label field, so you can have, like these here, a label for its corresponding data field, manufacturer ID for the data field manufacturer ID, and so forth. So let me go ahead and scroll over. As long as I don't click on the grid, I'm good. And so you can see I still got the plus sign for the text box. You can add it wherever you want. It's just that I want to add it in the details section first, so it adds the text box field, and then it'll also add the label there, but then I can move the label up into the page headers, so we have our labels separate from our data here. So, or you can put it up here, but then you have to take the text box, the data field that we're going to perform the custom calculation in, and move it down below. So I'm just going to go ahead and click it in the details section. When I click on it, boom, adds the unbound text box and its corresponding label. So we want the label up here with all the other labels that's heading up at the top of each page with the records appearing down below. And again, it's called unbound because it's not pulling in anything. It's not bound to anything. Like these other text boxes, this one's bound to pull in the manufacturer ID and only that, as well as this one to the date received and so on. But when we create our custom formula in here, as it were, to multiply that field by 5%, then it's going to be bound. Well, bound to that formula or that expression. So before we work on that, let's go ahead and click on the label here, the label field. And I want to move it up here into the page header section, so we've got the labels up at the top of each page and all the data down below. And to move it up there, you would think that, well, if you hover over the border when you see a four-way arrow and you click and drag it, just like we learned in earlier training videos in the design view, that when you move either the label or its corresponding data field, text box field around, it moves the other. They both go together. So that ain't going to work. So then you might think, well, hey, I remember you said to move them independently, just go ahead and click on that little gray box in the upper left-hand corner, in this case for the label. Well, yeah, when you click and drag, it moves independently, but it won't allow you to get outside of this detail section up into the page header. So that ain't going to work. So what you can do is hover over the border until you can see a four-way arrow, right-click, and go ahead and cut. And then come up here and right-click in the page header section and paste. When you paste it, it always pastes it over to the far left-hand side. So let's scroll over, and there you go. Go ahead and hover over the border until you can see four-way arrow. Click and drag that over to the right, and then we can scroll back, and great. So the text within that label, when you click inside of it, is text 18. Well, that's not what I want. I want proposed purchase price. So I can go ahead and type that in there, and well, I'll just type in a bunch of stuff. And then when you're done, hit enter. You can do it that way, or another way is to bring up the property sheet. So to bring up the property sheet for what you have selected here, you can do it one of many ways. You can either hover over the border of what you've got selected and double click really fast, brings up its property sheet, the properties of what you have selected. So the selection that I have is label 19, which, by the way, it's another way to find out if you have a label selected or a text box. So I have a label selected, and it's called label 19, and that's the name of it. And the text within it, or the caption, is a bunch of gobbledygook. Okay, so you can bring up the property sheet that way, close out, or you can right click on the border and go down to Properties, brings it up, close out, or just come up here on the Design tab to the Tools group, and there you go, Properties. Click on it, and there we go. Let me scroll over. So you got two names that you're working with basically. Well, one's called name, the other one's called caption. And the reason being that it's called name is for the design view. So you can have one name when it comes to designing and working with your fields here in the design view, and another name for the front end user view or what they're going to see. So how can that be helpful? Well, for the front end user, I don't want caption gobbledygook, so I can either click in here and change it or come over here in its properties and delete all that and call it PP price. So for proposed purchase price, then when I hit enter, I don't know if you can see that. It's very legible here because of the transparency, but it's updated. And so that's good for the front end user. But for the back end user, well, one way to look at this is that, let me scroll over here. When I'm looking around and I'm thinking, oh man, I've got a lot of labels all over here. I can't find what is the proposed purchase price label. I want to jump right to it. Well, I could try to read these labels. The transparency makes it a little bit difficult. Or I can come over here into the property sheet and click on the drop down arrow and go to label 19. I mean, that's the one that we have selected, but label 19 doesn't mean anything to me. But that's the generic number it gives it with the prefix label, so you know that you're looking in the label area here, as opposed to looking for data fields or the text box fields with the prefix text. So if I select text 16, what's that? Well, it selects it down below right here. That's the now function. So if I want to get back to my proposed purchase price label, I can scroll over until I can find it. And, you know, again, if you got a lot of labels and you just want to jump right to it, you don't want to squint your eyes to get through the transparency, well, I think it's easier to bring up the property sheet. Like if you close out, just come up here and click on property sheet, then click on the drop down arrow, look in the labels because there's the prefix. And if I remember right, it's 19, select it, it selects it. Great. But to make it easier on me, it's a label, right? So I'll leave the prefix alone and I'll call it 2 P's and a price. So for the proposed purchase price, hit enter. Makes it a lot easier. So when I'm out here gallivanting around and selecting other fields, rearranging them, and I'm like, okay, where's that purchase price? I want to jump right to it without having to scroll all around to find it. It's right here. Click on the drop down arrow and look in the labels because there's your prefix. And once you're in the label group, then go to the one that has the correct name, the one that you're looking for PP price, proposed purchase price. Jumps right to it. Great. And then down below we got our unbound text box. How about we give that a name? Over in the property sheet, it's known as text 18. So you got the prefix of text, meaning that that's a data field as opposed to, well, label. So I'll leave it as text, but I want to change because I don't know what 18 is. So if I come after it, delete the 18 and call it the PP price, and then hit enter, updates it so that way when I'm gallivanting about in my report, I'm scroll over here and I'm like, okay, what's the quickest way to find it and get right to it? You got the property sheet open. Fabulous. Go ahead and click on the drop down arrow. You want your text boxes. Scroll down to the T's for text. What's the name of the text? It's the PP price. Jumps right to it, right? You just have to scroll over to see it. Okay, cool. So in the unbound text box, you want to go ahead and type in a formula that will take the purchase price field and multiply it by 5%. Now there's a couple of ways you can go about doing this. You can either go ahead and click right in the unbound. And if you know how to write formulas, then just go ahead and start typing. But since maybe you don't, or there's something to look out for, let's not do that just yet. Let me click outside of it, go back and select it, and come over here in the property sheet. So we have the name of the text box, and then down below you have the control source. The control source does one of two things basically. It either lets you bind it to a field within the table like that this report's based upon by just clicking on the drop down arrow and selecting that field. But I already have all these fields. I think all of them, and I don't want to duplicate it. And so instead of doing that, let me hit the escape key. I can go ahead and type in the formula here. So you can type it within the unbound text box, type it here, or we did this in an earlier training video, or it's like this, in that you can come over here to the far right and click on the ellipsis button or the build button. When you click on it, does this expression builder look familiar from the query training video that we used it in? Oh, good. You watch my training videos. Okay. So you can see down below, examples of expressions includes the name of the field in square brackets, and then you can use the plus to add it to another field and so on, or in this case, multiplication, use the asterisk. So to get started, you can also, well, if you like, you can type it in here, but if you want to go ahead and build it by using the elements and categories and values down below without typing it in, then let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing is we're looking in the purchasing info report, and here's a list of all the fields that are in that report. And so what we do is we scroll through here to find the purchase price field, which remember, it's that field right here. Okay, that's the original price and it's right there. Once you select it, well, you can go ahead and do the expression value, but I just want the field, so I'll double click. There you go, in square brackets, that field, because we want to take that field and multiply it. So we need to add the asterisk. You can type it in, or you can come down here to the operators, and that's the technical term for these expression values. It says all, and then you can come over here, find the asterisk, double click, adds it, and then we want to multiply that. In case if you're not familiar with the expression values, well, you got the plus sign means addition. When you have the forward slash, it means divide, and of course the asterisk is to multiply, and the little sign there is to minus. But in any case, let's go ahead and multiply this by 5%. So we want to multiply it by 1.05. So when it's done, it'll have the purchase price plus the 5% on top of it. So take a look at that, memorize it, go ahead and click Okie dokie. And when I click OK, notice that over here in the control source field, it adds that formula. But what I didn't add was the equals. Now that's important. When you use the expression builder, it'll add it for you. But if you don't use it and you just type it in and you forget to put in the equals, it's going to have a fit. And you can see over here, well, it used to be the unbound text box, but now it's got a formula in it, so it's not going to say that it's unbound. And you can click in there and start making changes. But let me click off. And in fact, let me go ahead and select that and click in here and delete all that. And then hit enter. So now it's unbound. Okay, so let's go ahead and either come in here or come over here in the property sheet in the control source and just type it. So you can type it in here. And to type it in there, remember, you got to have square brackets. Purchase price, close square brackets. Now, the field name is not case sensitive. So the purchase price field was, well, there we go. We'll look at the text box. You can see that it's uppercase for the P's here. Well, I don't have it here, but it's okay. It's not case sensitive. So purchase price, then asterisk, 1.05, hit enter. Now you want to hit enter to make sure that Access checks your work, and if it likes it, at least at one level, then it doesn't give you the raspberries. But if it accepts it and has another issue with it, you can see over here, the other way to check it is you get this little tag. When I hover over it, it says this control has an invalid control source. What does that mean? Click on the tag. It says the expression must begin with an equals sign. You see, I told you to put an equals in there. The expression builder, when you click on the three dots, will add it for you, so you can't forget that. You got to type it in there, then hit enter, and then it clears the tag. So, you can type it in here. Let me delete that. Or you can go ahead and let me hit enter. And then come in here, you can type it in there. So once you get the feel for what the expressions look like, the formulas, you can just go ahead and type it in. Just make sure, of course, you enter the equals first, and then the open square bracket, purchase price, not case sensitive, close square bracket, asterisk to multiply, and then 1.05, hit enter, and it's happy. And you can see the rest of it over here in the control source. So that brings up a good point. The text box is only so big, I don't want to scroll in it, so I can bring up the property sheet and I can see more of it here. Of course, you can right click on it and zoom, and you'll see even more. Or of course, let me click cancel. You can click on the build button and it shows it there as well. So let me go ahead and click off of it. And we got what we want. We just need to check it out. And to do that, we can just go ahead and go to our report view. Come up here, right click on the tab, go to report view, and scroll over. And well, is 1700 multiplied by 5% give us what we're looking for? The 1700 plus the 5% increase, yeah, it looks good. But the problem is I don't get the formatting in Current C, which we'll talk about in the next training video, formatting controls, so we don't need to go over that here. But look at that, it kind of bleeds off. So this is the report view. If I want to print this out, is it all going to be fitted on one page, or is it going to bleed over part of it into page 2? Well, let's go ahead and take a gander. Right click up at the top, go to the print preview, click on it to zoom out. Okay, there's the overall view, and you can see it's being cut off. So where's that cut off stuff going? If we go to page 2, oh, there's the rest of it. What a waste of pages. So what I want to do, let's continue. There's page 3, but then that's cut off over here, so the rest of that is over on page 4. Well, that's annoying. Let's go ahead and right click and go to the design view and close out of the property sheet and scroll over to the right. It didn't have a problem before until I added the purchase price here. So I think if I can do some deductive reasoning, these fields were here previously, and so it looks like anything beyond that, or maybe beyond that line, is going to bleed over into the second page. So I got to pull these guys back or shrink up the field, but if I shrink up the data field, it may cut off some of the numbers here for the purchase price. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's scroll back and click and drag a line through all the labels, and then hold down the Shift key and click and drag a line through all its corresponding text boxes. And let's hit the arrow key several times over until the furthest one over to the right in the text boxes is about lined with the others here. All right, click off, and let's hover over the right-hand side of that grid and click and drag to bring it in. But before I bring it in, if that doesn't flag you when you go to the print preview that you may have fields bleeding over into other pages, before you go to the print preview, in the upper left-hand corner, you got this little square. When you click on it, it selects the entire report so you can bring up the properties for the report. Like if you double click on it, you see here what says selection type is the entire report. So you can set up the properties for the report as opposed to, well, going back to our labels, selecting that. In any case, let me go ahead and select that little square in the upper left-hand corner. And so there's the properties for the entire report, and we'll talk about that later. But what I want to show you here is that when you're up there and you get that fluorescent green triangle, well, below that you get this little tag, and it says when you hover over it that the report width is greater than the page width, possibly causing extra blank pages to be printed, and we already seen that. So if you click on that, report width is greater than the page width. In any case, you can edit the margins, remove extra space, get some of the suggestions here, but we'll go over this in greater detail in a later training video, the different ways you can work to clean up your report so you don't get these extra blank pages or part of the fields are bleeding over onto page 2. So what we need to do is come over here to the right hand side and click and drag the grid in, and when I do it far enough, this guy, that little green triangle, disappears. So now I'm not outside of the bounds of the report where it cuts off some of these fields to put them onto the second page, creating that extra page that I really don't need. So let's go ahead and take it for a look-see and right-click on the tab, go to the print preview. Okay, so there's page 1. I've got the lines on the other side of the proposed purchase price field, so it doesn't look like it's being cut off. And the best way to find out is to go to page 2, and there's the rest of it. Oh, that's nice. The only other thing that I have a concern about, let me right-click and go to the design view, is the alignment of these things. Because look at this field right here. It's down, it's not aligned to the top of these other text box fields, and it probably needs to be closer. So if I click and I put a, see if I try to eyeball it, that may not work. As we learned in an earlier training video, you can use the alignment feature, which allows you to select one text box and hold down the Shift key and select the other. And then when you use the alignment feature, if you align to the top, it'll take the one closest to the top and take the other one and bring it up to align it with it. Or if you said line bottom, the one that's furthest to the bottom, it'll bring all the other ones that are selected down to the bottom. And so to bring up that feature, after you select the text boxes that you want to line off of, then right-click on the border of one and then go down to align, and we say align top. So it took this one that was below the proposed purchase price and aligned it to the top of the other one. That's nice. And I think those are already aligned. Let me click off. And if you want to get these really particularly close to one another, the label, because maybe that one's a little bit too far to the left as opposed to that one, and you want to bring that one further over to the left, well, select that one, hold down the Shift key, select that one, and then right-click on one of them to align, and let's align left, and it nudges it over to align up with this one, which was furthest to the left to begin with between the two labels. And now when I go ahead and right-click to the print preview, I can click to zoom in. That report looks, to me, a lot better. And there's some other things I could change about it, like removing the lines around the borders, but we'll deal with that in later training videos after you create your text boxes and you're like, hey, I want it like these others, no lines. A lot of different things we can do to clean up a report we'll go over in later training videos. If you want to format your controls like the ones that we created in the previous training video, like the text box here for the purchase price, so for example, you can see that it doesn't have it in currency, as well as it's got a thin line around the box. Well, I want to put it in currency, and let's get rid of that border here for each cell. To do that, let's go ahead and right-click on the tab, go to the design view, and let's come over here to the purchase price, click on it, and let's bring up its property sheets. We can do that by double-clicking on the border, brings it up. And then just below the control source on the All tab, there's our expression, we got the format. Click in that field, and you get a drop-down arrow, click on it, and hey, look at that. We can go to, well, do you want to do the euro? Nah, let's go currency. And if you can't see the other side of it, of course you can scroll, or better yet, you can just hover over the edge of your property sheet and click and drag it to stretch it out more so. So when you click on the drop down arrow, you can see more of it here. The two columns without scrolling, that is. And so we'll go with currency. Select that. And before we go ahead and take a look at that to see if it actually accepted it, what about that border? Let's come down here to the border style. Instead of it being solid, how about if we click in there and change it to transparent? Ooh, I like that. And let's go ahead and close out of here. And let's go ahead and right click, go to print preview, and scroll over. Hey, no border, isn't that nice? And it's also in currency. Okay, I'm sold. Okay, one more thing I want to show you. Let's scroll down to the bottom of the report and scroll over. And we've got that long date. Remember, the long date, well, let me right click and go back to the design view, is coming from the now function. And so that's bringing in today's date, but what if I want a short date? I don't want the day of the week and then also the date. How about, well, let's see what's available. To find out, go ahead and select it. And by the way, all I did when I created this date is I just came up here on the design tab to the controls group, clicked on controls, clicked on the text box, came down here and clicked to add the unbound text box, and well, I selected the label, deleted that, because when it comes to identifying the date or labeling it, well, when I see a date, I know it's a date. I don't need a label that tells me that I'm looking at the date. So I deleted the label, and then I just came in the unbound text box and I typed in equals now, open, close parentheses, hit enter, and that's all I did. And of course, you can learn about that and all the fun functions that can probably be of help to you in Access and all these different fancy formulas and stuff by watching my Excel training videos on functions and formulas. So with this selected, let me hit the delete key so we can just go with what we got here. So select that, and then we need to bring up its property sheet so we can see what different formats are available, hopefully something in the short date arena. And to do that, you can right click on the border and go to properties. Brings up the property sheet for this, and you can see the control source is that function, the now. And hey, there you go. That's the problem. The format is long. Oh, that's too long. Go ahead and click in it, click on the drop down arrow. You can do something medium, or hey, how about the time? That's kind of timely. And you can do short time, except that looks like it's military time. I have to use my fingers once it gets past high noon, so we won't do that. How about if we just go ahead and do short date? And before we go ahead and check that out, let me close out of here, because something else that I want to show you is that, well, look at that text box. That's long. The date's probably just somewhere over here taking up that much space. So what you can do is with it selected, you see these little handles around it? Well, those are called resizing handles that when you hover over one, you get arrows pointing, in this case, up and down. For the top middle resizing handle, it allows you to go up and down. Well, when I start moving up or down or left or right, take a look down below over here where it says Design View on the status bar and watch what happens. Let me do it from the right middle resizing handle. When I click on it and I just hold it, you see what comes up? It says it has a total of one line that it takes up with a total of 42 characters in that. Well, I don't think my date's going to take up 42 characters, so let me push it in. And as I push it in, it shrinks down to, you see how I can identify how many characters like maybe 20 characters. Cool. Now you can do it that way, or one big advantage of the layout view is that when I right click and go to the layout view and I scroll down to the bottom and I click in that field, is that I can actually see it. So when I get close to it, I know when to stop. Well, except this is a single digit month, but I can imagine when we get to October with an extra digit that I don't want to get too close, so it cuts it off at the end there for 2017. But in the layout view, you can do the same thing. Just hover over the border. You don't get resizing handles. The whole side of the cell is a resize. So you can click and drag down, and then look at that. Down in the status bar, it says that will now take up 2 lines. So if I had a lot of text, it can wrap around and go to the second line instead of being cut off over to the right-hand side, right? And I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and hit undo, or I could have clicked and dragged that up. But let's do it over here now on the far right-hand side until I can see arrows pointing in opposite directions. Click and drag that in, and right about there maybe. So you can see the total number of characters down in the status bar is 9 when I let go. It should give me enough space when we hit the month of October and we get double digits for the month that we'll still see the end of 7 in 2017. And then of course the final test is to go to the print preview, because what you see in there is what's going to be coming out of your printer. So right click in a blank area, go to print preview. Oh, that looks nice. The theme feature is a quick way to apply complementary fonts and colors to your report. So instead of you doing the guesswork, like let's say you like the color for the report title here, but you don't like the banded color between each record to be this light shaded gray, maybe you want something else, but not so different that it's jarring, between the two colors here. You want something that's complementary. Or also for the fonts, maybe for your labels, you want one type of font and then something else that's different down below for your records, but not so different that again it's jarring to look at or read. In any case, if you want some help when it comes to changing this up for colors or fonts, then go ahead and right click on the tab and you can go to the layout or the design view. Go to the layout view, it's on the design tab in the themes group, right click, same thing for the design view, go to the design tab in the themes group. So you have your themes, which is a combination of both colors and fonts, or if you just want to change the colors for the report, you can look at that or just the fonts. But let's do themes first, and you can see down below you've got your different combination here, like this one's facet, and you can see when I hover over it you get a preview of it. Well, not now because I moved off of it. Let me go back and do some hoverage, and you can see, well, there you go. That one's called Ion Boardroom. Now once you select it, you're stuck with it. I mean, even if you close out of it and you say, okay, I don't want to save it, when you double click to open it back up, you see you're stuck. And the only way to go back to the way it was is if you knew what it was before you made the change, which fortunately I do. In any case, here you go. It made the font type for the labels, well here, pretty big. It looks like across the board. I can't really tell the difference here. In any case, I'd have to resize those fields, clean it up a bit. And this was purchasing info. The FO got cut off, so I may have to do a little work. Instead of doing that, if I right click and go back to, well, it doesn't matter, layout or design, just make sure you're on the design tab so you can go to the themes group. You can click on the themes drop down arrow and go back to the way it was, which was Office. There you go. Now you can do it that way, or if you just want to mess with colors, click on the drop down arrow, hover over any one of these that you like and select it, and well, there you go. You can right click and click on print preview, and I'm okay with that. And then right click, go back to, doesn't matter, layout or design. You can do colors or you can do fonts, and you've got 2 different combinations of fonts. You have it for your, well, that's not a good example because it has both Calibri for the headings and for the body of the font, Calibri, just a smaller size. How about something that's entirely different? Like, there you go. You have Calibri for the headings and then Cambria for the body. And you can see over here for your uppercase A, that represents Calibri for your headings, and then for the body of the report, just the details, you get Cambria. So if you like that, go ahead and select that and take a look. And if you're like, oh, I just don't like any of this, well, remember, you can always come back up here, click on Themes, and choose the default Office themes, and we're back to where we started. Now, if you want to go ahead and create your own custom colors or fonts, click on Colors. I've already created one here. It's called Spiffy, which, by the way, you can right-click on it to edit it or delete it. Let me come down here and click on Custom Colors, and here you go. You have your theme colors and the sample. So you've got light text against a dark background and dark text against a light background. So the black here, text background dark 1, is for it over here, what it looks like when you have a light background. Do you want it to be black text, or do you want to change that and say, well, let's do red? And there you go. So you can do that just by comparing and contrasting between what you select over here and the sample preview here. And your accents will represent things like, well, your charts and some of your objects. So this accent blue is the first column in the column chart here. If you inserted the column chart, you can play with that. When you're done, you can, of course, go ahead and give it a name, Spiffy 2, and then go ahead and click Save or hit Enter, and look at that. It's got all my text in red. Oh, I don't like that at all. In any case, if you don't like it, remember, you can go ahead and go to your themes and go back to Office. But before we do that, let's go to Fonts and really try to mess this up and do Customize Fonts. So you get your two. For your headings in your report, you can change that and do something like Monotype Corsiva. Ooh, that's a fancy font. Hit the Tab key. There's the sample heading. Then Calibri, I'm good. And then the name of it is something fancy. Hit Enter to save it. And I don't have any headings in my report. That's why I don't see the Monotype Corsiva, so it doesn't look like it's pulling. But just to be sure, right-click on the tab, go to the Print Preview, and if you're good with it, print it. If not, then you know the drill. Let's right-click, go to the Layout View or Design, and then click on the Themes drop-down arrow and go back to Office, and well, let's right-click to Print Preview, and we're back to where we started. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.